Welcome to the Daily History Chronicle. Each day, we travel back to discover a pivotal moment that changed the world. These aren't just dates and facts. They're stories of courage, conflict, innovation, and consequence that still echo through our lives today. Are you ready to explore? Let's see what happened on this day in history.
Good morning and welcome to today's episode. I'm Richard Backus, publisher of University Teaching Edition, and each day I invite you to join me as we reflect on a significant moment from our shared past. Today is November 23rd, and we're looking back 89 years to November 23rd, 1936. On that day, the first issue of Life magazine appeared on newsstands across America. The cover featured a dramatic black and white photograph by Margaret Bourke-White. The massive concrete face of Montana's Fort Peck Dam, towering and monumental, with tiny human figures visible at its base, showing the enormous scale. Inside, the magazine promised something revolutionary: to see life, to see the world, to eyewitness great events, to watch the faces of the poor and the gestures of the proud, to see strange things, machines, armies, multitudes, shadows in the jungle and on the moon, to see man's work, his paintings, towers and discoveries, to see things thousands of miles away, things hidden behind walls and within rooms, things dangerous to come to. Life magazine would deliver on that promise for decades, defining how Americans understood their world through photography. The magazine would document World War II, the Holocaust, the Civil Rights Movement, Vietnam, and the space race. Its photographers would become legends. Its photographs would become icons. And its rise and eventual fall would tell the story of American media itself. From the dominance of print to the digital revolution that destroyed it. Life magazine was the creation of Henry Luce, one of the most influential media figures of the 20th century. Luce had already founded Time magazine in 1923 and Fortune in 1930. He understood that each publication needed to find its unique niche, its particular way of telling stories that no competitor could replicate. For Life, Luce's insight was simple but profound. Photographs could tell stories more powerfully than words. The technology was finally available to reproduce high-quality photographs inexpensively on a mass scale. Americans were becoming increasingly visual in how they consumed information. The time was right for a magazine that would make photography not merely illustration, but the primary medium of storytelling. This was more radical than it sounds. In 1936, most magazines used photographs sparingly, as supplements to text. Life would reverse that relationship. The photographs would be the story. The text would support the images, not the other way around. Life would hire the best photographers in the world, pay them well, give them expensive equipment and generous budgets, and send them everywhere to document everything. The format was weekly, not monthly like most photo magazines. Life would be timely and immediate, almost like a visual newspaper, but with the production quality of an art book. It would cost just 10 cents, extraordinarily cheap for the quality, because Luce planned to make money from advertising, not newsstand sales. The gamble was enormous. Luce spent over $1 million preparing for the launch. He bought an existing magazine title called Life, an old humor magazine, just to get the name. He invested in new printing technology. He hired the best photographers he could find. Everything depended on whether Americans would pay even 10 cents for a magazine that was mostly pictures. The first issue sold out immediately. All 466,000 copies were gone within days. Newsstands couldn't keep it in stock. The second issue sold better. By year's end, circulation exceeded 1 million. Within 5 years, Life was selling over 3 million copies weekly. By the 1950s, circulation reached 5.6 million, one of the highest of any magazine in history. Americans had discovered something they didn't know they wanted, a weekly window on the world through extraordinary photography. Life gave them intimate access to people and places they would never otherwise see. A farmer in Iowa could see inside Stalin's Kremlin, a steel mill in Pittsburgh, a Maasai village in Kenya, or the interior of a cell where a murderer awaited execution. But it wasn't just about seeing distant places. Life also showed Americans themselves in ways they hadn't seen before. It documented ordinary American life, family dinners, high school proms, small-town main streets, with the same artistry and attention it gave to world events. Life made Americans visible to themselves. The magazine developed a distinctive style. Each issue featured a major photo essay, 10, 15, sometimes 20 pages devoted to a single story told almost entirely through images. The photographs were large, often full-page or double-page spreads. The layout was dramatic, treating each page as a canvas. The sequencing was carefully orchestrated to create narrative flow, emotional impact, and visual rhythm. Life created a new kind of career, the staff photojournalist with artistic freedom and substantial resources. Margaret Bourke-White, whose Fort Peck Dam photograph graced that first cover, became Life's first staff photographer. She documented the Depression, traveled through the Soviet Union, covered World War II, becoming the first female photojournalist accredited to cover combat, and photographed Gandhi shortly before his assassination. Alfred Eisenstaedt captured the famous VJ Day in Times Square photograph of a sailor kissing a nurse, one of the most iconic images of the 20th century. Robert Capa documented D-Day, his blurred, gritty images from Omaha Beach, conveying the chaos and terror of combat in ways pristine photographs never could. W. Eugene Smith elevated photojournalism to an art form with deeply researched, meticulously composed photo essays on subjects like a country doctor, the mercury poisoning of Minamata villagers, and the city of Pittsburgh. His work proved that journalism could be both truthful and beautiful. Gordon Parks, Life's first black staff photographer, documented poverty, racism, and the civil rights movement with empathy and unflinching honesty. His work helped white Americans understand the reality of racial inequality in ways that words alone couldn't convey. These photographers weren't merely documenting events, they were interpreting them, finding meaning in moments, making visual arguments. The best Life photographers were artists and journalists simultaneously, creating images that worked both as evidence and as art. At its peak, Life wielded extraordinary cultural influence. An appearance in Life could make or break careers, shape public opinion, and define how events were remembered. Life's coverage of World War II brought the war home to Americans in visceral, immediate ways. Its photographs from concentration camps provided undeniable visual evidence of the Holocaust. Its coverage of the civil rights movement, photographs of Birmingham's fire hoses, Selma's Bloody Sunday, Martin Luther King Jr.'s marches, helped build public support for civil rights legislation. Life also covered celebrity, fashion, and culture. Its profiles of movie stars, artists, and public figures helped create modern celebrity culture. Its fashion photography influenced how Americans dressed. Its coverage of art, architecture, and design shaped American taste. The magazine's editorial perspective was generally centrist to conservative, reflecting Luce's own politics. But the photographers often pushed boundaries, documenting poverty, inequality, and social problems in ways that challenged readers' comfort. The tension between Luce's politics and his photographer's vision created a publication that was simultaneously establishment and challenging. Life's decline began in the 1960s, though the magazine remained profitable for years after. Television was the primary culprit. By the 1960s, most Americans had TV sets. They could see moving images of world events in their living rooms every evening. Life's weekly photographs, however dramatic, couldn't compete with television's immediacy. When Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, Americans watched it live on TV. Life's photographs, published days later, felt redundant. Advertising shifted to television, where commercials could reach larger audiences. Life's advertising revenue declined even as its production costs rose. Color printing was expensive. Paying top photographers was expensive. Sending them around the world was expensive. The economics that had worked in the 1940s and 1950s stopped working. The magazine tried to adapt. It increased cultural coverage and reduced hard news. It experimented with format changes. But the fundamental problem remained. The world had moved beyond weekly photojournalism. Life published its last weekly issue in 1972. There were attempts at revival. Life returned as a monthly in 1978, then ceased publication again in 2000. It briefly returned as a newspaper supplement, then ended entirely in 2007. Each revival reached smaller audiences and had less cultural impact. The Life that mattered, the weekly that defined visual culture from 1936 to 1972, was irreplaceable and unrepeatable. What television began, the internet and digital photography finished. Today, we're drowning in photographs. Billions of images are uploaded to the internet daily. Anyone with a smartphone can take and share photos instantly. Professional quality cameras are accessible to amateurs. The scarcity that made Life's photographs valuable has been replaced by abundance so overwhelming that individual images rarely matter for long. Yet photojournalism itself is struggling. Newspapers and magazines that once employed staff photographers have eliminated those positions. Freelance photojournalists struggle to make a living. The business model that supported serious, sustained photojournalism has largely collapsed. The consequences are real. There are fewer professional photojournalists covering fewer stories with fewer resources. Important stories go undocumented. When they are documented, the images compete with billions of other images for attention, often getting lost in the noise. Social media has created new forms of visual storytelling, but it's different from Life's model. Instagram influencers and TikTok creators are visual storytellers, but they're selling lifestyles or entertainment, not bearing witness to important events. Citizen journalism fills some gaps. People with phones documenting protests, disasters, or abuse, but it lacks the resources, training, and editorial judgment of professional photojournalism. We've gained democratic access to image making and sharing. Anyone can be a photographer. Anyone can reach an audience. That's valuable. But we've lost something too: the institutional commitment to funding serious photojournalism, the editorial judgment that determined which stories mattered, and the shared cultural experience of millions of people looking at the same powerful images simultaneously. Life's success rested on insights that remain true even though the business model has collapsed. First, images are powerful. A great photograph can communicate emotion, convey information, and change minds in ways that text struggles to match. That photograph of the Syrian child pulled from rubble in Aleppo, the image of the Afghan girl with piercing green eyes, the picture of the lone protester facing down tanks in Tiananmen Square, These images shaped how millions understood complex situations. Second, context matters. Life didn't just publish photographs, it curated them, sequenced them, provided context, and created narrative. Random images lack impact. Thoughtfully presented images tell stories. In our current environment of decontextualized images floating through social media feeds, we're rediscovering this lesson. Third, quality requires investment. Life paid photographers well, gave them time to research stories, provided expensive equipment, and covered travel costs. The magazine had editors who worked with photographers to shape stories. This required money, lots of it. The current crisis in photojournalism partly stems from audiences' unwillingness to pay for this quality and the collapse of advertising models that once funded it. Fourth, curation is a skill. Part of life's value is editorial judgment, which photographs to publish, which stories to cover, how to present them. In an age of infinite images, curation might be more valuable than ever. But we've democratized publishing while devaluing editorial expertise. Paradoxically, life's legacy is everywhere, even though the magazine is gone. We're all visual storytellers now. Instagram stories, Snapchat, TikTok, we constantly document our lives and share images. We instinctively understand that images communicate powerfully, that sequences matter, that the right photo at the right moment can capture meaning. Life taught us that. The aesthetic of photojournalism, the dramatic black and white, the decisive moment, the telling detail, influences how we take and edit our own photos. Even casual smartphone photographers have internalized techniques pioneered by life's photographers. Documentary photography continues despite economic challenges. Platforms like Instagram have actually enabled some photographers to build audiences and sustain careers in ways that wouldn't have been possible without social media. The form has evolved, but the impulse to bear witness, to document, to make visible persists, and life's archive lives on. The millions of photographs Life published, plus many more that were shot but never published, have been digitized. You can search this vast archive online, discovering extraordinary photographs from decades ago. In that sense, Life continues to fulfill its original promise, to see life, to see the world. The collapse of Life and the photojournalism industry it represented poses a question we haven't adequately answered. How do we support serious visual journalism in the digital age? We want the benefits, access to information, documentation of events, visual storytelling, but we're unwilling to pay the costs. We expect professional quality journalism, but object to paywalls. We want photographers to cover important stories, but won't fund the travel, equipment, and time required. We value curation, but resent editorial gatekeepers. Perhaps new models will emerge. Maybe philanthropic funding can support photojournalism as a public good. Maybe platforms will find ways to connect photographers with audiences willing to pay. Maybe artificial intelligence will enable new forms of visual storytelling while making others obsolete. But for now, we're in a strange moment. More photographs than ever before, but fewer professional photojournalists. More ways to share images, but less sustained documentation of important stories. More visual literacy, but less visual coherence. We live in life's world, but without life's anchoring presence. Thank you for joining me today on the Daily History Chronicle. As philosopher George Santayana reminds us, those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Today we saw how Life magazine revolutionized visual storytelling, creating photojournalism as an art form and showing us the world through powerful images. a legacy that lives on even as the business model that supported it has collapsed, leaving us to grapple with how to sustain serious visual journalism in an age when everyone has a camera, but few can make a living documenting what matters. The next time you scroll through images on your phone, remember that life taught us to value visual storytelling, and ask yourself what we've gained and lost in the transformation from curated weekly magazines to infinite social media feeds. Until tomorrow, may your day be enriched by the lessons of history.